Hi lovelies and welcome, it's Funto here. I'm starting a breastfeeding series. So when I started breastfeeding, there were so many things that I had to research and figure out along the way. And I thought it'd be helpful just to create a couple of videos to make it super simple for you. This one is breastfeeding basics and surviving those first few weeks. So let's get into it. So the reason why the first few weeks of breastfeeding are so important is because that's the stage when breastfeeding is actually established. So it usually takes your body and your baby about 2 to 4 weeks before you get into the swing of things and before your body regulates your milk supply and you start to supply enough milk for your baby's needs, which is why I'm focusing this video on the first 4 weeks. And if you can survive those weeks, then hopefully you're set up for a really enjoyable long-term breastfeeding journey should you want it. So the first thing to do on your breastfeeding journey, I would say, is to start before your baby even arrives. So decide whether or not you want to breastfeed your baby or whether you want to do combination feeding, pumping or bottle feeding. So if you do choose to breastfeed your baby, it's good to understand the different ways that you can breastfeed. You can exclusively breastfeed, which means that you're primarily feeding your baby directly from your breast and that's their primary source of nutrition. Or you can do a combination of breastfeeding and pumping, which means once again your baby's only having breast milk, but some of it is given to them directly from your breasts and some of it is given to them via a bottle with expressed milk. Or you can do a combination of breastfeeding and pumping and also formula feeding, so you're covering different grounds. So I think it's important to understand the different ways it's possible to feed your baby, and so that you can be a bit more intentional about it and start researching it. I also say it's important to look into how breastfeeding works. So it very much works on a supply and demand basis. The more your baby demands milk, the more your body will produce milk to feed them. It's also helpful to take a course or watch some videos, read some books and educate yourself on breastfeeding, just so that you feel a little bit more confident and aware of the things that may come up and you're better prepared to do the things that you need to do to address them. You can also take antenatal classes. So when I was in my final trimester in my 9th month, I did some classes through the NHS which were online, and that was really helpful just to prepare me with the kinds of things I need to know in order to breastfeed my baby. I'll link a few resources below for some of the videos that I watched and the courses that I took that might be helpful for you. So on to the first week with your baby. So the first milk that your body will produce is called colostrum. It's a golden substance that's highly nutritious, very nutrient dense and very rich for your baby. And it comes in very small quantities because of how densely nutritious it is, and also because your baby's tummy is super tiny, so they can't ingest much food or hold much food for very long anyway. Your body actually starts to produce colostrum before your baby is born. So I actually tried hand expressing. It was actually kind of accidental. I tried hand expressing about a week before my baby was born, and I found that I was able to express a really small few beads or few droplets of this yellow substance, and that is colostrum. So after my baby was born, one of the first things the midwife did was to plop her on my chest, and we instantly did skin to skin. Skin to skin is a really important part of breastfeeding because it gives your baby the chance to bond with you. It regulates their heartbeat, their body temperature, and they're familiar with your aroma and your skin and just your essence as a mother. So it's really calming for them. And for the breastfeeding process, it's really great because it places your baby in close proximity to your breasts and it gives them the chance to feel around and get used to it. Interestingly enough, there's something called the breast crawl. You might want to give it a Google, but it's where newborns literally straight after birth are placed on their mother's chest and they're actually able to navigate and find their way to your nipples all on their own. It's such an instinctive thing for them, and that's also partly why your nipples get darker in pregnancy. It's to help the target be more clear for your baby and to make breastfeeding a little easier for them. So right from the jump, your baby is able to latch on and feed, although it is a process that will be ongoing to teach them and to teach yourself how to get that latch right, and skin to skin really helps with that process. So my first tip is to take advantage of that time to have skin to skin with your baby. In addition to encouraging skin to skin, my midwives very much told me to make sure I'm trying to feed my baby every 2 to 3 hours. That's because their stomachs are so tiny that they can't hold much food, and they're also growing rapidly in those early weeks, so they need all the nutrition and they need it quite frequently, and this is called cluster feeding. It can be quite intense and very demanding on you as a mum, but I'll get onto a few tips on how to navigate cluster feeding and help with the pain a bit as well. So the first tips that my midwives gave me was to position my baby nice and close to my body and to get their nose around my nipple. This means that when they open their mouths, their chin is raised and should be able to touch your breast, and they're ready to latch. So that worked for me, and I was fine for the first day that I was in the hospital. But by the time I'd gotten home, that is when it all just started to go left a bit. It was very, very painful. My nipples were sore and raw, and I remember just curling my toes when I was breastfeeding because the pain was that much. But she was super hungry and she needed the food, and she would cry otherwise, so I was just kind of bearing that pain. And so I would say it's really important to get help. Don't hesitate to contact your triage, your birthing unit. They'll often give you the relevant phone numbers that you need to be able to call them on demand. I absolutely did not hesitate to call them that I was struggling, and I was given advice over the phone by a midwife, and a lactation consultant was also sent to my home to help me. And this is what I would say was fundamental to having a successful and enjoyable breastfeeding journey, was having someone that came to the house and she sat down with us and really taught us on how to breastfeed. So one of the keys to breastfeeding is getting a deep latch, and getting the latch right is really the starting point, and it can be difficult to get right because it just takes a bit of time and getting used to for both you and your baby. So the lactation consultant spent time with us teaching us how to get that latch and how to position ourselves well so that baby would easily latch. So one of the things I did was I would sit on my sofa. I'd make sure I had lots of pillows or a nursing pillow. The midwife actually showed us how to do it without a nursing pillow, and just making sure that my elbows were supported and baby was supported on my lap as well. So getting a comfortable seating position and making sure that I was able to support baby well was a great thing that really helped me to practice that latching process, and also speaking with a lactation consultant who broke it down. So I'd say definitely contact your midwives, contact your birthing centre or hospital, and they can connect you with someone that can spend that time with you and really help you to get that latch right. There's also a really good video that I watched that explains the latching process, so I'll also pop that in the links down below if you're interested in watching that. So the next thing to consider is your milk coming in. So your body initially produces colostrum, and after that your body will gradually transition into breast milk, which is more white in colour, although the colour can vary. And this also comes in larger quantities and a bigger volume, which is appropriate for your baby because they're growing and their stomachs will expand and they'll be able to ingest more milk. So for me, my milk started to come in on day 3 after birth, and trust me, you'll know when it happens. It kind of just hit me, and my breasts were enormous, they were hard, they were hot, they were sore because my body had just produced a huge surge of milk. And I literally just sat in my bedroom like halfway to tears, and it was so uncomfortable. But there's a few things you can do to make that process a little less uncomfortable. So the first thing I did was actually to use an electric pump. And while this did take the edge off and helped me to express some of that milk, I'd actually say it's perhaps not the best thing to do so early on. So we were advised by our lactation consultant to be careful with electric pumps because breastfeeding very much works on a supply and demand basis. So if you are expressing milk quite early on while your body is regulating your milk supply and trying to produce enough for your baby's needs, you're actually signaling to your body to produce even more milk as you pump. And in the event that that milk isn't expressed or relieved from your chest, you might actually start to feel very uncomfortable or get problems such as clogged milk ducts and mastitis, both of which I had, both of which is not fun. We'll get into that in another video, but it's a whole thing. So you have to be careful with making sure that your body has had a chance to regulate its supply before introducing an electric pump. So what I'm going to do next time is actually to just stick to my silicone pump, and this is something that I actually used a lot more in, particularly in those early weeks, over my electric pump. So a silicone pump basically works with suction, and so it's not encouraging your body to produce even more milk, it's just catching the natural letdown that your body is already releasing, and it's also able to release just a bit of milk to help with engorgement. So when my first milk came in, I literally just had to sit in a chair, and my mum got some warm towels and was helping me to press my chest and massage it to help relieve some of the tension. And I also placed a silicone pump on each breast, which was collecting some of the milk that was being released as I was massaging my breasts. So that was a really good way to manage engorgement. Another good thing to do is also just to feed your baby and get your baby on your breasts. It can be really hard to do when your breasts are really sore and your nipples have kind of started to go through it, which is what happened to me, but it is a good way to release some of that milk. And then you can also use the silicone pump on the other breast to be collecting your letdown and milk that is being released while you are feeding. I explain a bit more about how the silicone pump works in another video about all the products you'll need for breastfeeding, so stay tuned to that, and I will link that in this video as well. So don't worry, the engorgement doesn't last. For me, I think it took my body a couple of days. I think by the end of the first week, I started to feel that less intensely engorged. I still was very full, but I knew I had more than enough for my baby, and I didn't feel as painful. It didn't feel as painful or as uncomfortable as it did on that first day. Now on to nipple care. Nipple care is really important. Like I said, those first few days can be quite ruthless, frankly. And for me, what I found is that the skin on my nipples actually started to peel, and that's because I wasn't getting a deep enough latch. So when you have a deep latch, your nipple is actually supposed to go to the back of your baby's mouth and isn't intended to rub on their palate in any way, which means that your breastfeeding shouldn't put too much strain on your nipples. But in the first few weeks while I was getting it right, she did definitely catch my nipples on rubbing on other parts of her mouth, which meant that my skin was peeling. Oh, it was so painful, but we powered through, and I did a few things to help. So the first thing was to use ice packs. So I had ice packs that I would place on my breasts just to cool them down after feeding, and particularly on my nipples, that was super soothing. I also used my nipple cream. This was really helpful because it was medicated but also safe for baby while I was feeding. So in between feeds, I'd make sure I'd smother on a really thick layer of nipple cream just to help to soothe and repair my breasts in the times that I wasn't feeding. That, coupled with a cold ice pack, did enough soothing to help my nipples heal. There are other items that you can use to help with the repair of nipples, such as silverettes. They are quite helpful for just protecting your nipples so they're not rubbing on your clothes and helping to just give them a bit of time to heal. You can also use your breast milk to help heal your nipples, which is also something that I learned from our lactation consultant, and it also blew my mind. Because of how nutritious breast milk is, it actually is really good for your skin as well as baby's skin. So what I would do is after every feed, I would also just use some of that breast milk that was already on the edge of my nipples and use that to coat my nipples and help them heal. It's so fascinating, but it actually works, so I would recommend giving it a go. I'd also say another thing that I did was I would take painkillers. So in general, I was recovering, so the painkillers helped with my general recovery, and it also helped to take the edge off the pain that I was feeling in my nipples. So don't be afraid to try a bit of ibuprofen or paracetamol. Of course, consult your doctor, your GP, your midwife before you take any medication. I got the thumbs up that it was okay for me to take some. and I was encouraged to do so following the guidelines on the packaging. So my final tip is to make sure you have a lot of support around you and make sure that you're looking out for any signs of baby blues. I feel like breastfeeding is quite an intense journey, coupled with the postpartum journey as well. It can get easily very overwhelming. I know I definitely felt down for a couple of weeks and I had some points where I just couldn't stop crying. Partly because your hormones are just balancing out and you're going through quite a lot. So make sure you do take care of yourself. Take time out to pause from the constant pace of feeding and caring for your newborn where possible, and make sure you're speaking to your healthcare visitor. They're there to support you. So if you do feel like you're getting signs of baby blues or depression, then they're there to support you as well. Make sure you can speak to family and friends or people that are close by who can also help to keep an eye out for you and check up on your well-being. Don't be an island in this time. It can be a lot to juggle on your own. So that's it for my few tips on how to survive the first few weeks of breastfeeding. If you're currently on that journey, then let me know how you're getting on in the comments down below and give this a thumbs up if it's been helpful, and consider subscribing for more videos like this one and the rest of the series. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.